The incident exploded across social media, igniting a firestorm of controversy and forcing the community to confront its deep-seated prejudices. Frustrated and embarrassed, Emily stormed away, her phone clutched tightly in her manicured hand. She was already crafting a social media post in her mind, convinced that once she shared her side of the story, everyone would rally to her defense. As she left, Officer Mike turned to David. "Mr. Thompson, is there somewhere you can go for now? I'd feel better knowing you have a safe place to rest." David nodded slowly. "There's a shelter across town. It's not much, but they know me there." Mike reached into his wallet and handed David a $20 bill. "Here's for bus fare and maybe a hot meal, and don't forget to call that number I gave you." David's eyes filled with unexpected tears. It had been a long time since anyone had shown him such kindness. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." As David gathered his belongings and left the park, neither he nor Officer Mike could have predicted how their lives would intertwine in the days ahead. Later that evening, Emily sat at her kitchen table, a glass of white wine in hand, as she typed out her version of the morning's events on Facebook. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, each word dripping with indignation. "Shocked and appalled by the state of our community. This morning, I encountered a dangerous vagrant in our beautiful Oakwood Park. When I called the police for help, they refused to do their job. Is this what we pay our taxes for? We must take back our parks and streets." She attached her edited video, carefully showcasing only the parts that supported her narrative. With a satisfied smirk, she hit post and leaned back, waiting for the likes and supportive comments to roll in. But Emily had grossly miscalculated. Within hours, her post went viral, not in the way she had anticipated. Other videos of the incident surfaced, taken by bystanders that painted a different picture. One of a privileged woman harassing a homeless veteran and making false claims to the police. The backlash was swift and severe. Emily's Facebook page flooded with angry comments, and people she had considered friends began publicly distancing themselves. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, each one a fresh wave of criticism and outrage. As the night wore on, her smug certainty began to crumble. She had always seen herself as a pillar of the community, someone standing up for what was right. Now, faced with public scrutiny, she was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Maybe she wasn't the hero of this story. Meanwhile, across town in a crowded shelter, David lay on a narrow cot, clutching Officer Mike's business card as he drifted off to sleep. He wondered if perhaps tomorrow might bring a change in his fortunes. What neither Emily nor David realized was that their paths would cross again in ways they could never have imagined. The events set in motion that morning in Oakwood Park were far from over, and the biggest challenges and opportunities for growth were yet to come. As dawn broke over the city, Emily woke up to a world that had dramatically shifted overnight. Her phone, which she had finally silenced in the early hours, was filled with missed calls, text messages, and social media notifications. With growing dread, she began to scroll through them, realizing that local news outlets had picked up the story. Emily's face was splashed across news screens alongside headlines like "Local Woman Harasses Homeless Veteran" and "Racism in the Park." The community was outraged. Her stomach churned as she watched clips of herself, face contorted in anger, spewing words she now regretted deeply. As she prepared for work, her phone rang. It was her boss. "Emily," he said, his voice tight with barely concealed anger. "We need to talk. come to my office as soon as you get in." The drive to work was a blur of anxiety and shame. Emily, usually confident and self-assured, felt exposed and vulnerable. As she walked through the office, she felt the stares of her co-workers and heard whispers that fell silent as she passed by. In her boss's office, the reality of her situation hit hard. "Emily," he said, disappointment palpable in his tone, "your actions have brought significant negative attention to this company. We pride ourselves on being an inclusive workplace, and your behavior conflicts with our values. I'm afraid we have to let you go." Emily left the office in a daze, clutching a cardboard box of her belongings to her chest. In just 24 hours, her world had turned upside down. Tears streamed down her face as she sat in her car, forced to confront the consequences of her actions. Across town, David's day was taking a different turn. He had called the number officer Mike gave him and was surprised to secure an appointment that very morning. As he walked into the Veterans Center, he was warmly greeted by Dave Martinez, the man Officer Mike had mentioned. "John Williams," Dave said, extending his hand. "Mike told me about you. Let's see what we can do to get you back on your feet." Over the next few hours, David found himself swept into a whirlwind of activity. Dave helped him navigate the complex paperwork for housing assistance, connected him with a PTSD support group, and even enrolled him in a job training program. As David left the center that afternoon, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. The path ahead was still long and challenging, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a fighting chance. Little did David know that his path would soon cross again with the woman who had caused him so much trouble just a day before. The intertwining of their stories was far from over, and unexpected twists were yet to come. A week passed since the incident at the park, and Emily's life had become almost unrecognizable. She lost her job, many of her friends distanced themselves, and she could barely leave her house without feeling the weight of judgmental stares from her neighbors. As she sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through job listings on her laptop, a deep sense of loneliness and regret washed over her. The anger that had fueled her actions in the park had faded, replaced by a profound sense of shame and a desperate desire to make things right. With a heavy sigh, Emily closed her laptop and decided to take a walk, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere of her home. Without thinking, her feet carried her to Oakwood Park. As she approached the entrance, Emily hesitated. This was where it had all begun. Part of her wanted to turn back and hide from a world that now felt so hostile, but something pushed her forward, a need to confront her mistakes head-on. The park was quiet in the late afternoon light. As Emily walked along the familiar paths, she found herself approaching the bench where she had encountered David. To her surprise, he was there again, sitting quietly. As Emily quietly looked out over the pond, her heart raced. Her first instinct was to turn and flee, but she fought against it, taking a deep breath as she approached the bench. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice a stark contrast to the harsh tones she had used the week before. "David?" He looked up, eyes widening in recognition, clearly uncomfortable with her presence. "I owe you an apology," Emily continued, her voice trembling slightly. "What I did last week was inexcusable. I treated you horribly, and I'm truly sorry." David regarded her silently for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Emily stood there, feeling exposed and vulnerable, waiting for a response that seemed like it might never come. Finally, David spoke, his voice low and measured. "Why are you really here?" Is it because you're genuinely sorry, or because your life has fallen apart?" Emily flinched at his words, but she couldn't deny their truth. She slowly sat down at the far end of the bench, leaving plenty of space between them. "You're right to question my motives," she admitted. "The truth is, I'm here for both reasons. Yes, my life has turned upside down, and that's part of why I'm here. But it's also made me take a hard look at myself, at my actions and beliefs, and I don't like what I see." David listened quietly, his gaze fixed on the pond before them. "I've spent so much of my life judging others, thinking I was better than everyone else. But this past week has shown me how wrong I was. I've lost my job, my friends, but more than that, I've lost respect for myself. I know an apology doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know that I regret what I did and I'm trying to be better." As Emily finished speaking, she realized tears were streaming down her face and hastily wiped them away, embarrassed by her display of emotion. David remained silent for what felt like an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but firm. "I appreciate your apology, but you're right. It doesn't fix anything. Words are easy. It's actions that matter." Emily nodded, a lump in her throat. "I understand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say it." As she stood to leave, David's voice stopped her. "Ms. Thompson," he said. "Emily Thompson," she supplied. "Emily, I can't say I forgive you. Not yet. But I believe in second chances. The fact that you're here, that you're trying to make amends, counts for something." Emily felt a glimmer of hope at his words. "Thank you, David. I promise I'm going to do better." As she walked away, she felt a mix of emotions: shame for her past actions, relief at having taken the first step toward making amends, and determination to follow through on her promise to improve. Little did Emily know, this conversation was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge her in ways she never expected, leading to an unlikely friendship. Over the next few weeks, Emily threw herself into volunteer work, desperate to make a positive impact on her community. She began at a local soup kitchen, chopping vegetables and serving meals to those in need. The work was hard and often thankless, but she found a sense of purpose in it that she had never experienced in her corporate job. One afternoon, as Emily was clearing tables after the lunch rush, she looked up to see a familiar face entering the soup kitchen. It was David, accompanied by Dave Martinez from the Veterans Center. Emily froze, unsure of how to react. "Emily!" Dave spotted her and waved her over. "I've heard about you. Come meet David.